Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Mustard Seed Bitcoin podcast. This week I have on Hunter Beast. Hunter, welcome. Yeah, glad to have you. This is going to be a great conversation as quantum and Bitcoin, quantum within Bitcoin has been such a hot topic, pretty much probably for like the last 12 months or so. And it may be getting more and more important as time goes on, obviously. But I kind of want to start off with very high level background of who are you, Hunter, and like how did you get interested in trying to make Bitcoin quantum resistant?
Yeah, so back in so I got my first job in tech in 2012. I was like a web developer, and it was a pretty humble job, and kind of worked my way up into more advanced and challenging things. I worked for a database company called Influx Data, it's NoSQL, um, later on, and then eventually got into Web3 type stuff. Uh, I'm based out of Denver, so that's pretty big here. And eventually, along my journey, I read the Bitcoin Standard because I had a number of friends who recommended it, and um, good friends. Because yeah, I mean, uh, after reading that, I decided to focus on Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. But when we say Bitcoin only, like it's kind of interesting because like there's a lot of interesting applications for the technology that we work on, and I think those applications should be built on layers. And so um, the layer community, um, when I was getting into things, was mostly like Lightning, RGB, eCash. BitVM didn't exist yet, but I was starting to um, build just different off-chain protocols. And about 18 months ago, I had had been talking with some people at the local bit devs, which I would later come to run, which is pretty cool. Um, and we actually founded I'm a founding member of what we call the Space here in Denver. A lot of really good people here, and um, we just had our all hands actually, a lot of love, and I think we're actually going to be successful in making a sustainable community here in Denver based on Bitcoin, which is pretty cool. But 18 months ago, I started writing a bit, and I knew what I was getting into when I was starting writing a bit because I've seen other people do it. I actually followed Jeremy Rubin quite closely in the check template verify stuff, so I knew it's not work to be taken lightly. It would be quite the commitment, and it is. And that said, I'm serious to devoting this time and responsibility to uh, solving the problem. Um, so, yeah, it's been a long process, and we're almost finished, but it's been very difficult, and it's been a lot of work.
Yeah, I love it. I think that was a great background, and the space in Denver is a great place. I actually got to visit it at one point. I think either earlier this year or last year. So it's a cool little community that you guys are building there in Denver, and obviously great to hear that you are working on helping making Bitcoin quantum resistant. Maybe like for people that are very unfamiliar with quantum, can you maybe explain like how does a quantum computer work at like a very high level, or like how is it different from a normal computer, and like why does this matter even at all for Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's interesting. Basically, when they were first theorized in 1981, I think, by Richard Feynman, he basically just described them as being able to harness fundamental physical phenomena for the purpose of computation. He thought that constructive interference in particular would be pretty useful, and sort of like probabilistic computing, which would sort of like, because like you normally think that it wouldn't be that useful to have like a computer that wouldn't reliably spit out the same answer every time, right? Um, but that's kind of how our brains work, and there's kind of an interesting parallel there with sort of like the quantum nature of consciousness, according to like Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose. But regardless, uh, around this, it's interesting. Around the '80s, they were also studying like fifth generation AI, they called it, and it there are actually two camps in the like kind of like AI discussions. There were the symbologists and the connectionists, and the symbologists just thought that we should just like use Prolog or something and like encode all information in a way that makes sense to computers so that they can reason with like algorithms that we carefully curate. And the connectionists were like, no, we just need like to make a lot of connections, and once we reach like a critical mass of like uh, neural nets, they'll have enough capability to um, sort of think. And it turns out the connectionists were right. We were just like back then they were talking about megabytes. They needed gigabytes, multiple gigabytes for the neural nets, the models, the weights, right, the parameters, and then also crucially, even if they could put together enough kit for like running sort of what we now have commonplace LLMs, they didn't have the data, and the data is also crucial, and we wouldn't get that kind of data until we connected a critical mass of humans on Earth to each other to get records of all the like how we think and how we talk, and uh, so we wouldn't get to this point until like we had the internet. And it's interesting, we also wouldn't have like the capability to sort of reinvent our money to be resistant against people who would um, leverage it to their own personal benefit, as has happened all throughout history. We wouldn't really be able to break out of this cycle until we have all the technology in place, the internet, cryptography, um, and other certain like key realizations. And Satoshi was able to piece those all together within about a decade of us having everything necessary, which is also quite interesting, and especially the timeliness, right, of the innovation from like addressing concerns around the global financial crisis, and the financial system and its fragility. Yeah, it's really interesting timing. It's very timely, well executed, and um, also interesting just that someone can disappear and be so anonymous, right? Like I mean, nobody has that kind of anonymity anymore. We all have a digital footprint. It's incredibly difficult to sort of claw back what little remains of your privacy. And so, yeah, it's just interesting that like Bitcoin is like a really interesting innovation. Um, I think if you think about it hard enough, you probably come to the realization it's a civilizational imperative that we switch the economy to being based on Bitcoin. You asked me, I'm rambling because like you asked me about how quantum computers work, but yeah, essentially they're capable of harnessing physical phenomenon on like a microchip level. To they do have to be super cooled, at least. Yeah, pretty much every design I know has some component that is super cooled, like a detector or something, like 15 Kelvin, which is like almost very close to absolute zero, and they're able to essentially like entangle qubits. Qubits are a state of matter that can have one of two states, right? They can be entangled with another qubit, and then their wave function is the same, and they when you measure it, you can they basically have the same state, and that then expands the Hilbert space of that system, which is like the number of quantum states in that system. And if you get enough qubits and you create a circuit in the right way, you will be able to take advantage of something called quantum parallelism, which essentially explores that Hilbert space um, all at once. And it's probabilistic, so it might not give you the right answer. But what's interesting is that it only really needs to give you the right answer once. So you can just like keep running it until you can tell, like you can easily verify classically that, you know, it would have taken a public key and turned it into a private key. So that's essentially how Shor's algorithm works. There's technically, if you want to go deeper, there's something called quantum Fourier transform, and there's also like a modular arithmetical oracle that's like a very deep circuit that has a lot of gates, and gate fidelity is a problem, noise is a problem. But the thing is, these are all they claim these are engineering problems and that they think they can solve them, and so that's that is interesting that they're sort of building up to building their capability and solving this really difficult problem, creating quantum computers. It's also possible that quantum computers are necessary for us to get through our this next stage of civilization, and that not only might they be necessary for like creativity, because like what's interesting about AI models is that they suffer from something called model collapse, in that they actually can't really create something novel and then feed it back into itself for training. If you do that too often, it really degrades the quality of the product, which is why they watermark all AI generated outputs, at least on images, and because so that they don't like essentially pollute the training set. And it requires sort of like human creativity to expand the statistical space there, and keep it viable. And maybe quantum computers could solve that, because it's a major unsolved problem in AI right now, is model collapse. And so and then there's also another thing that comes to mind, is that right now we're seeing a lot of chatter about like disclosure, and like there might be some kind of alien presence on our planet, or NHI I should say, and they probably don't see us as peers. That's quite clear because of like abduction reports. There are hundreds of thousands that are chronicled by an organization called MUFON. There's reports of cattle mutilations, exsanguinated corpses, that sort of thing. And anyway, they if we wanted to like have kind of like a peer relationship with any of these entities, we would need probably the capability to conceal like secrets, basically, from like any peer, right? Because like, I mean, if you think about it, like the capability to keep a secret is sort of necessary for self-sovereignty and national sovereignty, because if like a pin on your phone or a safe, right, like that's a secret, and it's used to sort of authenticate with your property that you are able to access it, and like it elevates sort of like a trust level, right? Like say in like a web of trust or something. And so it's very likely that we will need like quantum cryptography to be able to keep secrets from other nations, and also anybody else who might be observing, and otherwise they might not treat us as peers. And so it might just be like some kind of civilizational imperative for to develop this technology to meet them on that level. And also there might also be a possibility that we can and this is controversial because a lot of physicists think this is impossible. They talk about no communication theory and how faster than light communication violates causality. Except Sabine Hassenfelder has said that you can actually make FTL comms work in, I think, special relativity, so long as you use the cosmic microwave background radiation as a reference frame uh, in your protocol design. And what's interesting is, like radio protocol, like communications protocols, like throughout history, have always needed some kind of um, transistor or computation device of some kind to sort of isolate the noise and cut through it and just make the protocol work. Modern mobile phones have a cellular baseband chip. It's like a whole separate computer in the phone that like manages MIMO and OFDMA type stuff, right, in 5G. And so it yeah, it's very possible that it's just like an engineering problem. We need better quantum computers in order to solve for FTL comms, and if we do that, then we'll probably like transition our civilization as something that's like more capable. We have more bandwidth, more privacy, more uh, like anywhere. There's no attenuation, right? It's instant. There's no lag or latency. There might even be a possibility for like Maxwell's demon type, like transmission of energy through information. And so like there's that opens up a whole new possibility, and if we do develop that technology and it becomes successful, then there's also a likelihood that within a decade the planet Earth will just go radio silent, because it's like so much more effective and useful technology. We'll just all upgrade and then we'll go silent and it'll all be in quantum comms. And then of course the next challenge would probably be some kind of like psychic veil, like privacy technology of some kind, because like if you think about like, you know, Thomas Gampel's research into consciousness and like remote viewing and the psychic connection there, then there might that might be like an additional layer of privacy and information technology that we're just completely unaware of. And so there's probably like multiple levels of like cryptography and encryption that we'll need to like solve as we kind of expand our awareness of all the different challenges we need to solve as a civilization. You know?
Yeah. I love how you just hit AI, aliens, quantum, and consciousness in one answer. That was incredible. And tied it all back to Bitcoin and what's relevant today. So it's fascinating. You brought up how like with quantum, there's, I guess, you mentioned that I think Shor's algorithm that theoretically would, I guess, be able to derive a private key from a public key. Is there more detail that you can provide on that in particular? Like, I'm
Sure.
trying to.
So
maybe,
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
So and actually, like Nick Carter's writing a series on this is really good, by the way.
Nice. Yeah.
In the first article, he explains how elliptic curve cryptography works, and there's like basically like a modular arithmetic component there. There's elliptic curve cryptography is interesting because, like, I mean, there's like there's a lot of math in it. This geometric. I think there might be a prime number component too, but like there's something like Shor's algorithm is known for being able to isolate periodicity, basically like find repeating patterns, and that's something that like fast Fourier transform or just like discrete Fourier transform, they all kind of do that, and they're kind of necessary for communication. They're kind of necessary for isolating signal from noise, and so that's like a big part of how Shor's algorithm works, is that it's able to essentially like model a mathematical problem using physical phenomena, and you can actually make it so the wrong answers cancel out and the right answers constructively interfere.
Interesting. And so, if a quantum computer was developed, very soon or tomorrow, and with Bitcoin specifically, what coins are at risk? Are all coins, all 21 million coins?
Yeah, no, I think if we were surprised, Bitcoin would be better off than most cryptocurrencies because 2/3 of the supply is behind hash keys. So there are, like maybe 6 million coins as tracked by Project 11's like kind of Q-Date clock tracker. There's 6 million coins that have exposed public keys out of the 20 million that have been mined, right? And there's still another million to go. Um, in 115 years, is it? Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. And so that's cool. But then there's about 90% of of that 6 million, there are 1.7 million public key coins, paid public key coins. They're like from like the original Satoshi coins, CPU miners, that sort of thing. And the original Bitcoin client essentially defaulted to miner hoards going to public keys, even though it did support public key hashes, because like we saw, the first P2 public key hash transaction only a couple of weeks after the first the Genesis block, right? And so yeah, and then there's also a number of reused keys. So the problem is whenever you send someone money on Bitcoin, you need to reveal your public key in order for them to verify your signature. And so and then if you were to like reuse your address, like to set essentially like address reuse is it's a specific scenario. It's not just like receiving money to the same address multiple times. It's the important part here is that you will have had to have spent from it after receiving funds, and then try to receive funds to the same address again. After you've done that, you've already exposed your public key, and that makes you more vulnerable to short exposure attacks certainly, and then eventually long exposure attacks. But well, actually, no. You're actually vulnerable to a long exposure attack, even if you like let's see, because like in the case of adversaries, it's interesting, right? Because like you'll have exposed your public key before, somebody could crunch on that, like in the case, in the odd chance that you'll receive money to it again, and then they can just they don't even need to like execute a short exposure attack. A short exposure attack is a lot more challenging because you have less time, and so we kind of deprioritize that in a way. It's like Bit360 in the research that we did for that, like it solves immediately the problem of long exposure attacks and Taproot coins. And Taproot coins are vulnerable because a Taproot address is a public key, is a valid public key. Every Taproot address is a valid public key, even though it's only 32 bytes long. It's an X-only public key without the parity bit, and I think they just set it to 0.2 or whatever. But the essentially Taproot's necessary to solve what they call the key path spend. So there's two ways to solve. There's two ways to spend from a Taproot address. There's the key path and the script path. And the key path is based on elliptic cryptography. It's based on a public key, and then they tweak it with a number that so you can actually only I think because of the group theory, the group there's like you actually have to use, you can only in EC operations you can only add a public key to another public key, and so you have to first take the hash of the Merkle root of the mast of the script path. You then turn that into a public key, and then you add those two together. But I think it is EC add. It might also be EC mul, but they're kind of similar. But operations. But Nick Carter's articles on this explain all this pretty well. maybe they don't go deep into Taproot though. Taproot is very complicated, and I have done quite the deep dive, and there's a lot there. It was actually 3 separate BIPs, and I think we'll need probably a similar number of BIPs for making sure that Bitcoin is more quantum resistant than it already is. Um, and we just need to make sure that what BIP 360 introduces is a new output type. Some people call it an address type that's different. Addresses are different than outputs, but they're related. They just aren't the same thing. And so, anyway, the new output type used to be called pay to quantum resistant hash, and then based on feedback from the community, we decided to make this more generalized, and it's going to now be called pay to TypeScript hash, and pay to TSH, and basically the reason we focused on this as our fundamental thing we wanted to do first was it essentially gives us if so long as we fix Taproot, then we can have sort of like wallet optionality where at spend time, if your wallet supports it, you can choose to which algorithm you want to use when you spend. If you want PQC or post-quantum cryptography, or if you want elliptic curve cryptography. And I think, it should be up to the individual choice. And that said, there's a lot there too. It's a very complicated problem. That's why the BIP is 18 pages, so there's a lot to cover in all of this.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I guess, recapping kind of some of what you just said, there's roughly about 6 million coins that are vulnerable to, if a quantum computer was suddenly discovered, those could be at risk, whether those were very old coins, Satoshi era coins, or just coins today that someone has sent, Bitcoins to an address, they've spent from that address, and then they sent additional Bitcoins from that address. Those coins are vulnerable because the public key has already been exposed. And then you pointed out you're working on a BIP that would, help make Bitcoin more quantum resistant in the future. Because like he's pointed out, I guess a majority of coins are already kind of safe from quantum computers. Anything else that very high level, just trying to explain it back to the audience, anything else critical that I'm missing there with the threat or your proposed BIP?
So there's a lot of other things, like post-quantum cryptography, NIST, the NSA, how NIST and NSA have worked together. There's constant cryptography. There's which is where the government might introduce cryptography that could be used to steal secrets. They've done this in the past with an algorithm called 3DES. So that their reputation, in my opinion, is quite tainted, and there's also the suspicions around P256, which are also known as SEC P256R1, which is a different elliptic curve than Bitcoin uses. Bitcoin uses SEC P256K1, and the difference between K1 and R1 is that K1 is based on the Kublitz curve, which is where the K comes from, and Kublitz curve can be computed just through a very simple algebra, and so it makes sense. Kind of, it's a sensible starting point. Whereas Sec P 26R1 is based on what they call random constants, which are sort of pre-chosen and specified in the document that was published in 2000 by the SecP working group. But then the thing is, we don't know really. We're told they're random, but we can't prove that, and so we don't really know how they were. We can't know, and so there's that's a problem that essentially that might be one reason why Satoshi chose K1 instead of R1, even though R1 was more accepted and more broadly used. Like, it's used in web browsers, but K1 is not, which is interesting, right? And so like, and then unfortunately, all like the best game in town, the best, most polished cryptography for that could be used in a way that's resistant to the potential threat in the future, quantum computers, it comes from NIST, which, nothing goes through NIST that doesn't also go through the NSA. They hire all the best cryptographers, so they're the most polished, most like peer reviewed, and most like performant. And performance is a big deal in post quantum cryptography because we're supposed to create harder problems for quantum computers to solve, but they also like are pretty hard for classical computers to even just compute, right? Like some of these algorithms like take 10,000 times longer to verify than
Wow.
elliptic curve cryptography. So like it's a big problem, right? And so uh, and like, so the implementation matters, the specification matters, all the engineering trade-offs matter, the security assumptions, all these things, like, and it's imperfect, there's a lot of problems, and then it all goes through NIST, and then in 2013, like, the kicker is that it turns out that Edward Snowden leaked the existence of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets, where essentially the NSA was spending like $80 million a year just back then on building a quantum computer for the explicit purposes of breaking cryptography. And they were working with defense contractors like Raytheon and Honeywell, and also the University of Maryland, and they that's just what we know from the leaks. And so he so like, it's kind of like how we get like a bit of honesty from the government, like a little bit of transparency through the leak, and the NSA is like actively attacking cryptography that we all use, and then they're providing us the cure. And so yeah, of course, like, and then my job is to like look at what they're producing and explain to Bitcoiners that, like, quantum computers are not sovereign computers. They're not something you can just like verify that they're a threat. You kind of have to trust the government for saying that they like created this threat, and they're now trying to basically like provide encryption that we might, if we're unwitting, might actually backdoor in like a problem into Bitcoin, and we have to avoid that. We have to do everything we can to avoid that. And there's a simple way, in my opinion, to address that concern, and that is to basically base the signatures on SHA-2. Because SHA-2, or SHA-2v6 as we know it in Bitcoin, is but it's part of a larger class of algorithms known as SHA-2, is we use this already. We know it works well. We know it's probably, I shouldn't say we know this, but I'm fairly confident that SHA-2 will remain secure well into the future. And if it isn't, that's going to be a much bigger problem for Bitcoin. So also, like the reason why I don't think SHA-2 is a problem is there's a couple of reasons. One is like, a lot of cryptographers in the community agree with me. There's also, so experts agree, but then there's also the fact that it's just really well designed, and to attack it, you would need a completely different quantum algorithm called Grover's algorithm, which scales a lot worse, and like in ways that, like, it's hard to explain, because like basically, I was talking to a post quantum cryptographer. His name is Pierre Luc, and he's in Alberta, I think, now, and he basically is writing a paper on how he estimates that we would need like a perfect quantum computer larger than the size of the moon in order to attack a 256-bit number with Grover's. And so there might be like ways to optimize and cut that down, but like that's where we're at right now. And so I've sort of deprioritized that problem in my mind, and in fact, I think it's our best bet to secure Bitcoin well into the future. Hash-based cryptography based on SHA-2 is probably going to be how we want to make the new signature algorithms work in Bitcoin. And so, uh, and of course, like the problem is that hash cryptography. There's a couple of problems with hash cryptography. One is one-time signatures are kind of the standard for that, and the problem with that is one-time signatures won't work in Bitcoin for the very reason that when little blockers got their way, or just like sort of defended their position, right? And that means that in order for like the limited block space to work, we need to be able to prioritize and reprioritize transactions in the mempool. And there are two mechanisms for that. There's RBF and CPFP, right? But either way, yeah, you're going to kind of need to sign a new transaction to sort of like reprioritize that. At which point, like fee bumping essentially requires the capability to sort of reuse public keys, and that's problematic from not only like a post-quantum cryptography perspective, but also like a one-time signature perspective, right? So like I mean, like from like a quantum threat and a OTS, both of those are like sort of problematic. And so the way that's solved in modern PQC is there's an algorithm called SLH-DSA, also known as Sphinx, and it essentially creates like an 8-layer hypertree of millions of potential keys that aren't necessarily generated all at once, but they're sort of generated as needed, and it all just kind of becomes this like Merkle tree that you commit to, but it's all a bunch of keys, and so it dramatically reduces the possibility of an OTS reuse, which to explain why that's bad, it doesn't probably doesn't immediately reveal your entire private key, but it can reveal parts of it over time as you reuse the key. And so reducing that likelihood by like creating millions or even more of keys in advance for your wallet to pick from makes it sort of stateless, and so that's why it's called stateless hash rate, SLH-DSA, and digital signature algorithm. And that cryptography was developed by Daniel J. Bernstein in part, and so that guy is another. I believe he has a lot of integrity as a cryptographer. He's built crucial things before that rely on it, like Signal and Monero. At least they use his curve. Yeah, that's what I should. Which is the Edwards curve, ED25519. But there's a flaw in it, or at least like maybe not. I wouldn't say a flaw, but like you have to understand how there's foot guns, right? There's something called the what's it called? There's there's basically like you have to use a special algorithm that mitigates against a misuse in its design, and that was something that initially was a problem for Monero, but then they came up with a solution for it. But unfortunately, bulletproofs aren't quantum resistant, and so they heavily use public key cryptography, especially I think they use some kind of range proof. And so the problem there is like, if you like they really need to adopt post-quantum cryptography as soon as possible, because yeah, I mean, like it's the problem is like if you're trying to use it to secure secrets well into the future, that's it's just like you need to start now. otherwise it becomes what they call a harvest now, decrypt later attack. And yeah, I think Monero and Ethereum will be really poorly impacted by this if there is a surprise. I hope they get their act together. I mean, I'm not the kind of person who is like a complete like and total shitcoin hater. But I the thing is I me personally, I just focus on Bitcoin because there's so much there. It's an incredibly deep rabbit hole, and also it's um uh, I mean, like in terms of like parties and like the limited time we have on this earth, I think I think probably one of the biggest problems we could solve in our lifetime is the fact that the money we use is broken and essentially used to extract wealth from everyone, and it impacts the poor the most. And it's an incredibly unfair, exploitative system that is used to essentially like monetary colonialism, like Alex Dean puts it. Alex Dean puts it. It's just really, I think, uh, uh, like we need to focus on that. Now, of course, like privacy coins are nice, but like I don't know necessarily if I want nation states or multinational corporations to have the same kind of privacy that an individual would. And in Bitcoin, individuals can find privacy in layers. Lightning privacy is improving. eCash privacy is improving. There are still unsolved problems in both, but there are solutions that can be had and engineered towards that. Um, like there's also the like programmability covenants, that kind of stuff. That's some of that requires to some extent some software changes. I'm not sure, but and they would improve like Bitcoin's capability as money as programmable money. There's people who think that who take issue with programmable money also. But and of course there's the big arbitrary data concern. But regardless, yeah, there's lots of unsolved problems right now in the space. If a quantum computer threat came up tomorrow, which is possible, we can't know that there aren't just already spooks out there just kind of hanging out in the background. They've done this before. If you heard of the imitation game that when they first broke the Enigma code, yeah, the British were all about that, right? And like basically sacrificing the lives of thousands of sailors for the greater good of the state, right, and the war, and all the money printing that support it. And yeah, it's interesting, like the correlation between money printing and war is quite ingrained. I learned the other day that some of the first national banking acts came out of the Civil War here in the United States, 1863 and 1864, and yeah, so like the establish like the correlation between war, like us like killing millions of humans, of people, right, of each other, is kind of amplified and prolonged and worsened through the capability to extract value from people unilaterally and without their consent. And so and that's just happened throughout history many times. Like Michael Saylor talks about this, and because he's a student of history, and like I can only imagine, like there might be a case to be made that Bitcoin is some kind of alien technology given to us because we have the capability at the time when we finally had that for sort of the first time in our history to create a system that is that resilient against this what we like to call the exorbitant privilege of sort of the issuing the global reserve, right? Like basically challenging the sovereignty and hegemony of the United States, the most powerful country in the world, right? And on our own turf too, because we also invented the internet. And so like if you look in the design of BGP, that's also like very interesting because they basically assume that the operators knew what they were doing. And there's a lot of like interesting assumptions in the design of military technology that like, gets handed to civilians, and we're just like but anyway, yeah, there was I, I think that one of the, like, if I've actually written about, that theory a little bit in a Substack post called "Bitcoin is a Great Filter," and I recommend people check it out. There's only a couple more things I would like add to that nowadays. Just that, I think I think crypto quantum computers are a civilizational imperative, also in a similar vein to Bitcoin, that we're going to need to be able to keep secrets and communicate with each other, best distances, and also yeah, it's I think it's just I think it's going to become more obvious and apparent to people over time. If we do get kind of like a full disclosure and access to like whatever Galactic Federation Wikipedia there is out there, the first question I would have is just like what do they how do they conduct commerce, right? How does their money work? How does their economy work? I mean, there's this sort of assumption that AI will lead us to a post-scarcity future. There'll be abundance, but a lot of those people don't quite understand how, like, essentially, like, as Lynn Alden explains in Broken Money, she explains that money solves the problem of the coincidence of wants. And I mean, sure, in a world of 8 billion people, there's probably going to be plenty of coincidence of wants, maybe. But the other thing that money does is it gives you the capability to convince someone else non-violently to do something that ordinarily wouldn't. And then if you give it to them, they can convince someone else who, ordinarily wouldn't do something for them. And so it's just like a really nice, convenient invention. And if you take that to its furthest logical conclusion, you get sort of like capitalism, which is the voluntary exchange of goods and services. And so um, it's just like a really nice system. And but it becomes problematic when the state gets involved and they start distorting markets with their monopoly and violence. And so I think now, with all our technology, we have a better chance than ever to sort of create the systems that are needed to um, obviate the perception of necessity for uh, state intervention and regulation and involvement. And like, we don't necessarily need to have a gun pointed at us for us to do the right thing. And that's, I think, probably one of the more redeeming parts of humanity, is that, like, we're generally good, unless there's like a perverse incentive or some kind of like asymmetric advantage that people can take advantage of. And one of those things is central banking and sort of like preferential credit creation for the purposes of enriching the wealthy and powerful at the expense of those who can least afford it, the poor, right? And so, like, we're essentially in this like system of like reverse Robin Hood, and it's really sad and depressing, and it results in like this like sort of like uh wealth extraction, rent seeking behavior that is like just like a net suck. It's like a maximal enshittification, right? And so, like, it's just like a trend towards like just becoming shitty. And that's just the fiat economy. And it's safe to explain it. He predicted this, like, all this, like, many years ago. Like, I would say, what was it 2018 that he published the Bitcoin Standard or something like that?
Around then, yeah.
And yeah, and it's just like, yeah, good point, buddy. Like, you're right. Like, and also, like, people he based his ideas on, Rothbard, Hayek, and all them, right? And so, it's yeah, it's. I mean, I I think if you give it enough thought, that he will be proven correct. It just makes too much sense. And so that's why I devoted my career to working on this problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you just said there. I mean, Bitcoin is a tool that empowers the individual, which is, a great tool, and it's been working for 16 years, and likely will continue to work for a very long time. You were talking about earlier, and that you were talking about like cryptography itself, and like almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's like almost as if cryptography is like a game of cat and mouse, where it's like you have like Bitcoin's current, cryptographic primitives within, the current public and private keys. It works, and it's, very likely completely, unbreakable as of today, but we can't necessarily prove that it's unbreakable. And there theoretically could be backdoors. And then when you talk about, quantum computers coming out, like obviously then it makes certain cryptographic primitives breakable. And then you mentioned like, okay, well then which quantum resistant cryptography do we choose? It's like we don't necessarily know which one's good, right? Like they haven't necessarily been around for a while. The U.S. government could recommend one. They're doing a lot of research on whatever, and like they could recommend one that they have the back door to. So it's like I guess this is a very difficult problem to solve, but it's one that we're gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I decided to devote as much time and resources as I can towards it, and that's also why I joined up with Mara. They are working on a sidechain platform called Andro, where we can actually field these algorithms on to protect real Bitcoin on sidechains, and then we'll have a bridge that can address all the different like challenges that quantum computers could pose to Bitcoin without necessarily needing to upgrade it first, which is also a pretty neat design. It's pretty technical, and also like we just don't have enough time to get into the bridge design. But I've written about it a little bit. Ultimately we're the other thing that made the reason why it made sense to partner with Mara is because they have 5% of the hash rate, and they operate a private mempool, which is necessary as part of that bridge design to make it quantum resistant.
Makes sense. So I guess maybe on what you just said, or maybe completely different, like what's next for the Bitcoin community in terms of making sure at some point, if the threat really starts to materialize, that Bitcoin is quantum resistant? Like what do we need to be doing right now? Or what do you've kind of talked about your bit, but what is like the main priority, I guess, for the Bitcoin quantum resistant development community at this point?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still like there's so many unsolved problems. Like for example, like watch only wallets, which are necessary for multisig, aren't actually possible with SLH DSA cryptography. So it's like the best solution I would have for like securing most kinds of coins, but it becomes more complicated when you want to do multisig, and so we're going to need to come up with solutions for all these problems, and it's also quite slow. There are some people who might advocate for modular lattice cryptography, or MLDSA, which uses a different problem than what secures elliptic curve cryptography. Elliptic curve cryptography uses the discrete log problem, and in lattice cryptography, it's called the shortest vector problem. And so they're essentially like expanding the problem into multiple dimensions, and it just makes it harder. But yeah, I mean, what can people do? Well, we're in the middle of rewriting BIP 360. It's almost finished. It should probably be finished by the time this. I don't know what your cadence is, but we're working really hard, and it's just been really hard. And but it's going to be exciting. It's going to be worthwhile, and that'll be available on BIP360.org once it's ready. We'll be making a lot of noise about it over in the coming weeks. Maybe, I mean, like it's the holidays now. It's taken us so long. It's been just stressful and difficult and tiring, and adjusting everything. But we want to make it sure it is as best as we can possibly make it, which like the standard for a BIP and its quality should be high, I think, and have lots of eyes on it and lots of review. This is some of the more impactful technology of our time, right? And so we should take the responsibility seriously.
Yeah, I like it. We'll definitely be tuning in to read it once it's finally or published the latest state. Hunter, is there anything else in regards to Bitcoin or quantum or anything else that I should have asked you, or anything else that you want to share?
Oh, I'm just grateful for everybody who is taking the time to take this issue seriously, giving it a good faith, um, like just everyone's time is valuable, right? Like we have a limited time on this earth, and for us to like kind of pay attention to that, take it seriously enough is I think a good thing, because like even if you're unconvinced that quantum computers could be a threat, which is fair, because they've always been theoretical, and so like I mean, there's uh, like I mean, sort of this I would say the Steelman case for taking it seriously is, to put it succinctly, is that Bitcoin is kept crypto-economically secure through Bitcoin mining, which requires Bitcoin to have value. And if the value drops significantly enough, it might compromise its security and become a bigger issue. And um, so there is like I think a good reason to sort of address with the quantum discount, right? Like the market will discount Bitcoin so long as it's quantum vulnerable, and um, the problem is also like over time, like like it becomes like quantum vulnerability, making sure Bitcoin is more resistant, uh, is going to be it's such an incredibly large problem, and it will take a lot of time to address. I hope we have plenty of time. There's also, a question of like, I also don't think it'll be, at least initially, very, let's say, economical to attack Bitcoin, even like, because like there's of course the big exchange wallets, but those ideally will move, and I've seen them move. The exchanges are upgrading their cryptography and the security. 50% of Cloudflare traffic is now post quantum. There's Signal and iMessage and all that, and but the the other like if all the big wallets move to safer setups, then that just leaves Satoshi's coins and sort of like the what are considered like I think the legal term is unclaimed property, and so then they might. But the thing is, there's only like 50 Bitcoin each, and so in each key. So like, you're really going to run like a multi-billion-dollar quantum computer that costs like millions, a day to run, over like like for 50 Bitcoin. It might not be economical, but and also like as the CEO of PsyQuantum once told me privately, was it was like we don't want to jeopardize our government contracts. But then like I walked away from the conversation and I realized, oh wait, what if the government pays him to attack Bitcoin? Like he would do it, and like that was like his almost like admitting to me that he would. And so like that's also a consideration. Like maybe that's one way to fill up what they call this, the SBR, right, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, Bitcoin is for enemies, and we can let the chips fall where they may. The markets will probably be good enough to sort of like support anything. And ultimately, like I'm very like white pilled on this because for a few reasons, but like ultimately, I think that the universe wants to sort of reduce entropy and increase love, like Thomas Campbell says, and it's kind of like a hippie like mantra. But like if you understand like sort of how things work in the universe, it kind of will lead you to that conclusion. Like we're not. This is not a nuclear wasteland. This is not a dystopia. Contrary to what the mainstream media wants you to think. Actually, as Alex Jones puts it, the universe is fire in its beauty, right? Like, I mean, we actually, as sure, there's fiat enshittification, there's, central banking, there's the one big beautiful bill that locked us into multiple trillions of dollars of deficit spending, leading to like a hyperinflationary debt spiral sometime in the future when Social Security runs out, right? And so like there's a lot of things to be blackpilled about, but I wouldn't dwell on that because there are solutions. I have faith in humanity, and I think that whatever is going on, and I don't have the full picture. I'm not a spook. I still call it the CIA, and like I think we have a good chance of solving everything. I think that there might be some powerful being out there, creator of some kind, that's rooting for our success.
I agree. I like that. That's probably a good spot to end it on. Hunter, thanks again for your time. Thanks for your work on Bitcoin, trying to help make Bitcoin quantum resistant. Where can the audience go learn more about you and what you're working on?
Yeah, so bit360.org is a good start. And also my ex CryptoQuick, and also just so you know, like I chose that name well before even cryptocurrency was even a thing. I've just been going by it all my adult life, and so not trying to like push any kind of nonsense on you guys. But also I have an Oster. I need to get back to using that more. Just been really busy. It's been a exhausting year. I've been doing a lot of travel and speaking at conferences for 360 for the purposes of collaborating with my peers and everybody I need to work with and get this done. And I'm grateful to my team, Mike Casey, Isabel Fox and Duke, Jeff, and not Mike, we like to call him. He likes to go by an M. And yeah, and we have lots of the people helping us and in the community. Chester, Pierre Luc, and lots of other people. And then there's a Telegram group, Make Bitcoin Quantum Resistant, and also just there's so many people who have been helpful, and I feel like we do have an acknowledgement section, and so. I just hope that we will be able to solve this problem and the next.
I like it. Well, Hunter, thanks again. This was an awesome, very overview that went very high level, but also deep into specific things. So this has been great. Thanks again. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Perfect.